So last week we kind of quickly went through Revelation, the end of Revelation 11 and Revelation 12, because there were just a few things we really needed to point out. And I'll go ahead and just in review with you some of those things. In Revelation chapter 11, that second half, the seventh trumpet sounds. And again, the trumpet sounds are a warning of things to come. And so the seventh one sounds, and an angel of the Lord says, "The kingdom of the world has become the kingdom of our Lord and of his Christ, and he will reign forever and ever." And we stopped for a short time and discussed as to whether or not the Lord's kingdom has come or not, at least in one particular sense. And again, when we're talking about premillennialism and this idea of the rapture and Armageddon that people have concocted, they would say that, you know, the Lord is going to come and the world will become his kingdom for 1,000 years and that sort of thing. And so we discussed why that's not so. That was sort of the first bit of there. And then essentially at the end of chapter 11, again, we have these voices, the elders, saying essentially, here he comes, here's God and his great power and his wisdom and judgment. And then there are, the temple of the God is in heaven, and the ark of his covenant appears in his temple. There's flashes of lightning and sounds and peals of thunder and an earthquake and a great hailstorm. And then that leads into chapter 6, which kicks us right back in, or sorry, chapter 12. Chapter 12, which kicks us into some more very interesting imagery that we are going to continue this morning. But in chapter 12, we have a pregnant woman clothed with the sun and the moon at her feet, and on her head a crown of 12 stars. And she cries out in labor and in pain to give birth. And so we discussed the crown, Stephanos, that is a victor's crown. We discussed the number 12, because I finally updated all the numbers on that slide, which is unfortunate because we have two more numbers to discuss today that I did not put on that slide. So, oh well. And so we discussed perhaps what the woman, we all pretty well figured that the child that she is pregnant with is Christ. The woman here being the whole of God's people, and that is because she's in existence before the child comes, and then of course is still existent after she gives birth. So we have the Old Testament people who are there before Christ, and then New Testament Christians who are there after. And so it covers the whole of God's people. And then we have, and this is important for today, we have a great red dragon. 7 heads and 10 horns, and on his heads were 7 diadems. And I kind of skipped over that because that's what we're going to talk about this morning. Because the 7 heads and the horns and the what does all that mean? What does that stand for? That's what we'll get to today. But his tail sweeps away 1/3 of the stars of heaven and throws them down to earth. And then the dragon stands before the woman who's giving birth so that he might devour her child. She gives birth to a child, and Christ is immediately sent up to God and his throne. And then the woman flees into the wilderness. And again, important for today, what we see from there is, here is yet again another attempt by the great red dragon, by Satan, if you will, to destroy God's plan or to take Christ, and he fails yet again. 3-time loser. And then there's this war. We talked about this. Michael and his angels are waging war with the dragon and his angels, and the dragon and his angels aren't strong enough, and they lose to Michael and his angels. And the point that was made there was, they're not even fighting. He's not even fighting Christ. He's not even fighting God. He's fighting representatives of God, Michael and his angels. And the point that was made last week was, if you can't make it past the representatives, then you're certainly not going to make it to, right, the CEO, the business owner. Right? The example I gave was a receptionist. If you can't get past the receptionist, you're not going to make it to the... So that was part of Satan being a 3-time loser, is here he is waging war with Michael and his angels, representatives of God, and he fails. So 3-time loser. And let's see, what did we end on? I believe the devil goes off, or Satan, the dragon, goes off to battle those or to inflict harm on those who follow God's commands. And that's essentially where we left off. And that leads us to what is probably the most controversial, the most quoted chapter in Revelation, right here, chapter 13. And it really has taken a life of its own. There really is a lot of confusion here as to what's being talked about. But what we find in Revelation chapter 13, and hopefully by the end of this lesson, we will all have a better understanding, and a logical one, and a contextual one. But what we have in Revelation 13 is 666. The mark of the beast, the number, right? And man, that's really sent a whole lot of people into a tailspin of, if you see 666 somewhere, if you get a new license plate and it has the number 666 on it, do you get rid of it? Do you no, I need a different one. I can't think of other examples, but different things where the number, a SKU number on something you're buying or something, and you see somewhere in there are the numbers 6 and then 6 and then 6 somewhere in this line of number. Well, then that's a bad omen. I can't own this. I can't buy this. I won't have it in my house. I guess another one that was mentioned is the dollar bill, right? They have those numbers on there. If you look at that, I can't, throw that one out or shred it, right? Because the devil is in this dollar bill. He's in my license plate, that sort of thing. There's a whole lot of fear over a number and what it may or may not represent. And if anything, this lesson might be a little disappointing for you when we get to the end. As far as all the other numbers have meant things, so does 666. It does mean something, but I think you'll actually be a little disappointed. It's not quite as exciting as throw away your license plate and your $1 bill, that sort of thing. But I think it's still extremely important that we get our heads right on the number, the mark of the beast, 666. So let's look at verse 1, because we need to talk about a couple things first. And as I've reminded you many times before, I'll remind you again. John is seeing a vision. These are things that are representative of other things. These are not literal things, right? We've already talked about if you're standing out in your front lawn, looking for a pregnant woman with the moon at her feet and a red dragon waiting to devour her child, you're not going to see it. Okay? This is a vision representative of other things, and as again, we've talked about plenty of times before, things that must take place shortly. No, not in 2023, shortly as in to the people he was writing to and at that time. It's going to happen, things that will happen to them soon. Some of what John says in Revelation, we've talked about this as well. We're not gonna get all of it. Some of this is hard to determine specifically what he's referring to. But for you and I today, as a reminder that this chapter, and really the whole Bible, was not written to us, but for us, we at the very least today can come away with it with an overall lesson for us today. So this is a book of prophecy, this is a vision, this is cryptic writing, and remember that these things must shortly take place. So, Revelation 13, verse 1, and he, now it's logical given the 12th chapter that the he here would very well be the dragon. And in the previous chapter, the dragon gets multiple names, the dragon, the serpent, the devil. And as I mentioned, he's been beaten at every turn. He's a 3-time loser so far, right? And in verse 17 in chapter 12, we're told that the dragon goes off to make war with those who keep the commandments of God. And so in verse 1 here, It's kind of interesting. But John sees this dragon standing on the sands of the seashore and says, okay, I'm a 3-time loser. I need to ask for some help. Because he is waging war against the saints, those who will do the commands of God. So he stood on the sand of the seashore, and I saw a beast coming up out of the sea, having 10 horns and 7 heads, and his horns were 10 diadems, and on his heads were blasphemous names. Who on earth could be this beast? The number 666 will help us a little bit, but John is giving it away. Now again, you and I are sitting here, again, it's foolish, the premillennialism thought to sit here and say, what does this mean? What is today? 21st? What does this mean, May 21st, 2023? Not a whole lot. Not a whole lot. There is, I think the mic might be a little loud. There is a message that you and I can take from it today, but to sit here and say, okay, I'm going to pull up the news, and I'm going to see if I can find something that's representative of 10 heads and 7, or 10 horns, 7 heads, the 10 diadems. Well, what would that be, right? And that's how we get this premillennialism of, okay, what if, 7 heads, okay? Joe Biden, Putin, again, Chinese guy, I'm sorry, I don't care enough to learn his name. Whoever else, North Korea guy, Kim Jong something, right? You go through and okay, these 7 leaders, that's probably the heads, right? Okay, now what would be, right? Do you see how you're just pulling it out of thin air? This was written to people who would better understand what on earth John is referring to. That doesn't mean you and I can't understand what John is referring to. It just means we're going to have to do a little bit more work than just pulling it out of thin air, which is not work at all, if you ask me, right? So, I'm going to jump here. You don't have to go there. But chapter 17, starting in verse 7, the angel said to me, "Why do you wonder? I shall tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and 10 horns." So the beast makes a recurring, kind of has a recurring role here. The beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. What on earth, right? But then in chapter 17, we're not left to wonder, so I'll read this to you in verse 9. "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." See? Now it makes sense. Just kidding. We'll keep going. "And they are 7 kings." The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman, which if you'll remember is the whole of God's people, on which the whole of God's people sit. And those 7 mountains are really 7 kings. What about the kings? Well, 5 of them have fallen. 1 of them has yet to come. And when he comes, he must remain a little while. And then the beast, which was and is not, is himself also an 8th and is one of the 7. And he goes to destruction. That doesn't make sense yet, but it will, right? So we have 7 kings. 5 have fallen. The 6th one has not come yet, and when he does, he won't be here for long. And then the beast is number 7, but also number 8, is essentially what's being said there. And the 10 horns that you saw are 10 kings who have not yet received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for an hour. These have one purpose, and they give their power and their authority to the beast. The 10 kings, right? That's a little interesting, and I'll give you my best view of that. 10 kings that don't yet have a kingdom, but they get their authority from the beast in a sense, and they give over their power and authority to the beast. So hopefully, stay with me. There's a fair amount to cover here. 7 kings, 5 have fallen, 1 is yet to come, and when he comes, he must remain a little while. given the time frame, and again, if we're saying this is early 70 AD, roughly when this was written, this fits. And maybe I should have made a slide of all the names because we're not going to remember all these. But if you look at the emperors of Rome, historically, here's 11 of them: Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian. The first thing you might notice is Julius Caesar is not listed there. And the reason for that is because Julius Caesar was a self-appointed dictator. So we'll use the term emperor there lightly. He died 17 years before the Roman Republic became an empire, so there's no reason to list him as an emperor. The second thing you'll notice is I listed 7 emperors, 11 kings. I mentioned 11 of them, but John says there are 7. So what's the number, or what's the issue there? Well, it's the 6th, 7th, and 8th one that I mentioned: Galba, Otho, and Vitellius. And here's a reason for that. Right? If we remove those 3, then we go back to 7, don't we? Well, Galba was emperor for 7 months. Otho was emperor for 3 months. And then Vitellius came in and he was emperor for 9 months. So what's going on in that time of those 3 emperors, which, if you don't get the point I'm making, 6 months, 3 months, and 9 months is not, that's nothing, right? What's going on at that time in Rome is a civil war. And their rule was so short that they virtually made no contribution at all to the empire of Rome. They really were not there for very long. So when you remove those 3, you have Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. So then we can take the historical context of those kings and go back to what John says, and he says 5 have fallen. So Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, and Nero are dead when John is having this vision. 5 of them have fallen. And then he says 1 is, which would put us at Vespasian. And Vespasian was the emperor of Rome from 69 to 79 AD. So again, if we consider, here's the emperors that Rome had. 5 are gone. 1 is, that's Vespasian. That would have been 69 to 79 AD. And most scholars and others would say that the book of Revelation was written somewhere between early 70s AD to mid 90. This would put it early 70s, mid 70s. So it lines up thus far. And again, that kind of helps confirm about the time Revelation was written. So John is writing this revelation. 5 have fallen, 1 is, in which I'm writing this vision to you. So early 69 to 79 AD. And then John says, the other has not come. That's Titus. That would be the next emperor in line. And notice John is telling these people, when the next emperor comes, he must remain a little while. How long did Titus rule over the Roman Empire? 2 years, 2 months, 20 days. I'm not going to get into the number 2 there. I don't think that's one of those numbers that we really need to focus in on. Probably doesn't mean anything. But that is to say, that is longer than those other 3 emperors, but still 2 years and 2 months when you're thinking of the emperor of an empire, a king of an empire. That's still not a great length of time. So there is 1 king yet to come, and when he does, he'll be here for a little bit, but not too long. And then John says, and the beast which was and is not is himself an 8th and one of the 7. And he goes to destruction. So we already see the end of this beast, right? But that would lead us to Domitian. Why would John say he is the beast that was and is not? Who knows their Roman Empire history here? It comes down to a nickname. A nickname. I guess we could call it a nickname. Nero, who was a king of this empire for a time, under Nero, the persecution of the saints was pretty severe. So let's say during the time of Nero, the beast was. After Nero dies, the persecution of the saints is not nearly as severe. So the beast was, and then not so much. And under Domitian, which is the last king in this list here, the severity of the persecution of the saints is just as bad than it was under Nero, if not worse. The beast was and is not yet. So at the time John is writing this would have been about the time Vespasian was king. So he says, you all know Nero, the beast was and is not. But when Domitian comes, will be. So the reason I say that, again, let's give it historical context. When Domitian does eventually become the king of Rome, the emperor, the hostility towards Christians starts all over again, and some would say even worse. And Domitian, here's the nickname, was considered Nero Redivivus, which is, when he becomes emperor, people call him Nero Revived. Nero Part 2 is what, I mean, because, man, this guy is really putting it to those Christians, like Nero did, if not worse. And the persecution that begins with Domitian lasts until roughly 311 AD. And I didn't put this is one of the numbers that I didn't put on there, and I should have. A small significance to the number 8 is often pointed to a resurrection or a new beginning. So Domitian is the 8th, a resurrection, right? And they called him Nero Redivivus. So he's the 8th king in a new era. Historically, a new era of Christian persecution begins. And that's why John says the beast was and is not, because Domitian's not emperor yet. But that's also why he says the beast is the 8th, Domitian, but he was also part of the 7. Because if you look back at those other emperors, especially Nero, the beast was. Now, that could mean policy-wise, morality-wise, ideology-wise, persecution-wise, like with Nero. The beast was, right? And he was one of the 7 as well. You can look back at the history of Roman emperors and their persecution of Christians, and you'll see it from time to time and how severe it was. That may be why John says the beast is number 8, which is Domitian, and also one of the 7. It could also be because Domitian is the son of Vespasian, which would make him one of the 7. And again, I'll let you decide. Maybe it's both, right? But there's some Roman history for you there, I guess. So there's 7 kings and then the 8th. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Titus, and Domitian. And again, there were 3 more in there, but they were kings for a few months that they really are not counted. Verse 12, and the 10 horns which you saw are 10 kings who have not received a kingdom, but they receive authority as kings with the beast for 1 hour. These would also be referred to as client kings. So Trajan, I'm probably butchering it. I'm from Oklahoma. What are you going to do? Trajan to Diocletian. These are kings. There are 10 kings between those two in this same time frame that we're getting. These are kings who submitted themselves to Rome. Rome has allowed these 10 people, we as Rome will allow you to be kind of like a king, basically, to these people. But you're not really, right? Because they're in submission to Rome. So they're client kings. They're not quite kings. They don't have independent authority. They're sub-rulers. So there are 7 heads, and with these 7 heads, right, over the course of these kings and over this empire of Rome, there are also 10 little kings that really don't have any appendant authority or independent authority, but rather they get it from the beast. They get it from Rome, and they work for the beast. They work for Rome. Verse 13, we're told that the 10 kings have one purpose. They give their power and authority to the beast, and they will wage war against the Lamb. The Lamb will overcome them because he is the Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called the chosen and faithful, which has kind of been the theme all throughout Revelation thus far. So here is the beast. 7 heads and 10 horns. The period of 7 kings throughout the Roman Empire history, excluding the 3 that really did not do much. And 10 horns, these sub-rulers that Rome allowed to be in that position. Again, I know this is a lot, but I hope that, and I don't know where you all were at with the number 666 in your head. I don't know if when you think of the number 666, you think of the classic giant, buff red devil with the pitchfork and the horns. You think that is 666. And you almost immediately, as John is explaining this, you kind of see that go away. And, well, no, it's 666 is the beast, and the beast is these kings over the course of time and their sub-rulers. And I hopefully the number 666 is becoming clearer to you as to who the beast is. We don't, yeah, go ahead.
Well, I've always been taught that 666, the number 6 is incomplete, 7 is complete.
Right.
And Satan is incomplete.
Yeah,
That's what I'm taught.
for sure.
Maybe you said that, I didn't.
Oh, no, you're correct. We'll build up to that. That'll kind of be, and I sort of toss it in at the end, but no, you're fine. No, that's good. We're going to end right on that verse because it's, no, you're fine. We don't have to rely on Revelation 17 to come to the conclusion we just did. Right? Some of you might have been Googling Roman emperors to see if I'm just making these names up.
I can't find the last one you said was the revised.
Remission, Nero
What's his
Redivivus,
name?
Domitian, Domitian, I think. Again, we've talked about this before going through Revelation. Look back at Daniel, and this is kind of neat. But in Daniel chapter 7, he will also help us come to the same conclusion. Now, keep in mind, Daniel would have been written roughly 535 BC, or nearly 600 years before Revelation. I gave you that number like the first class in this curriculum. Daniel would have been written roughly 600 years before Revelation. And this is important to remember. John is writing this supposedly during the reign of Vespasian, so he's looking back at some of these kings as he's telling them what's soon to happen. Daniel sees a lot of the same vision, but again, Daniel is 600 years before, so Daniel is not looking back at these things, he's looking at some stuff down here. And you kind of see that in the wording. We'll see that here in just a second. After this is Daniel chapter 7, verse 7. After this I kept looking in the night visions, and behold, a fourth beast, dreadful and terrifying, extremely strong. It had large iron teeth. It devoured and crushed and trampled down the remainder with its feet. It was different from all the other beasts before it. It had 10 horns. While I was contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, came up among them, and 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots before it. And behold, this horn possessed eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth uttering great boasts. If you look at what Daniel is saying here, there's no doubt as who this fourth beast is. And later on in verse 23, he says, the fourth beast will be a fourth kingdom on the earth. And in verse 24 as well of Daniel 7, he says that the 10 horns are 10 kings. So here is Daniel. Now, we have to point this out. Daniel refers to 10 horns as 10 kings, where John refers to 7 heads of 7 kings. But here's, again, we have these 10 horns, 3 of which are pulled out by the root, and a little one that starts to grow. And so if we go with that same line of thinking, Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius Nero, 3 horns pulled out by the root, Galba, Otho, Vitellius, Vespasian, Titus. That's 10 horns. From Daniel's perspective, 600 years before is what he might see. And again, Daniel says, while he's contemplating the horns, behold, another horn, a little one, comes up among them, which we would probably then say, if we're going along with this line of reasoning, here comes Domitian somewhere down the road. And then Daniel says, right, as we already mentioned, 3 of the first horns were pulled out by the roots. John seems to ignore 3 kings, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius. So 3 kings ignored over here, 3 heads. Daniel dismisses 3 horns. They're pulled out by the roots. So from Daniel 7 to Revelation 17, we get a pretty good indication of who the beast is with its 7 heads, with its 10 horns. But there's a bit more evidence to look at. Back in Revelation 17 at verse 9, and I know we're jumping around a bit, but in verse 9, John says that the 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits. And if you, we don't have a map of Rome, but if we did, you would see 7 hills of Rome. And to add to that, verse 18 of chapter 17, the woman who you saw is the great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. There really is not much need to speculate about the beast. John and Daniel both do a pretty good job of explaining, even though it's cryptic. Again, as I said at the beginning of class, you and I may not be like, oh, I wonder if he's talking about Vespasian at the time. I don't expect you guys or myself to be, well, yeah, that's right, Vespasian would have been king. And then Titus, and I bet he's talking to me. No, I don't expect people to know that, but I expect people to try. Because otherwise, we have people who go, it's probably the last 7 presidents we had, maybe. Or maybe it's these leaders, or, well, you're just pulling it out of thin air at that point. You're not even really trying. So let's finally go back to chapter 13, which is where we were meant to be this whole time. The beast which I saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like those of a bear, and his mouth like the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his throne and his great authority. The only other place in the Bible you find this type of beast is Daniel chapter 7. And for the sake of time, I won't read it, but verses 3 through 7 or 8 or so. Very similar description, same beast. Now, I will say this, if you do go and read Daniel chapter 7, and compare it to Revelation 13, you will say, the lion, the bear, and the leopard are in reverse order. And again, the reasoning I would give behind that is Daniel is looking this way, and John is looking this way. So Daniel 7 verse 23 tells us that these beasts are kingdoms, and Daniel 7, 14 and 27 tell us that out of this 4th kingdom will be a kingdom that God sets up, and that kingdom will never fall. We're almost out of time, so we'll try and run through this last bit a little bit quickly. That fact parallels the vision that Daniel has in Daniel chapter 2, where he sees King Nebuchadnezzar's vision. So we have the Babylonians, the Medo-Persians. The third kingdom is Greece. And then verses 40 through 44 in Daniel 2, along with history, and the fact that Christ came and establishes his kingdom during the days of the Roman Empire tells us that the fourth beast, Babylonians, Medo-Persians, Greece, Rome, the Roman Empire. So, back to chapter 13 of Revelation, if you look at this verse that we're reading, verse 2, that is the beast, that's the dragon, is these kings of Rome. It's Rome. And then when you consider that, again, John likely was writing this during the reign of Vespasian, which would have been 69 to 79 AD, we can know who the beast is and what time this vision is meant to be, which is soon, for them, not for us. So as we close, just a few minutes, really quick. The number 666, what on earth does that mean? We have this Nero Redivivus, the persecution starting all over again. Verse 3, the whole earth is amazed and follows the beast. They worship the dragon because he gave his authority to the beast, and they worship the beast, saying, who is like the beast? Who is able to wage war with him? Here is Rome and Rome's followers mocking God. Your God cannot defeat the beast. And there was given to him a mouth speaking arrogant words and blasphemies and authority to act for 42 months. Persecution and protection, right? The authority to act for 42 months was given to him. So here's all this buildup about this beast, and he's going to wage war, right? The dragon loses to this woman. He's unable to devour her son, and so he stands on the seashore and he says, I need help as I wage war against the saints. And the dragon, or the beast rather, comes, and the people worship the dragon, they worship the beast, they follow Rome, and they say, who could take down the beast? And there's authority given for 42 months. Doesn't last forever, just 42 months. All right, here we go. Verse 6, he opened his mouth in blasphemies against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle, that is, those who dwell in heaven. And it was given to him to make war with the saints and to overcome them. So Satan's goal is to gain souls. And over authority over every tribe and people and tongue and nation was given to him. And all who dwell on the earth will worship him, everyone whose name has not been written from the foundation of the world in the book of life of the Lamb who has been slain. If anyone has an ear, let him hear. If anyone is destined for captivity, to captivity he goes. Which, again, you have the people who are following the beast and worshiping the beast. And John is saying, if that's what you want, that is what you will get. If anyone kills with the sword he must be killed. Here is the perseverance and the faith of the saints. 42 months, persecution but protection. I saw another beast come up out of the earth, and he had 10 horns like a lamb and spoke as a dragon. He exercises all authority over the first beast in his presence, and makes the earth and those who dwell in it worship the first beast, whose fatal wound was healed. And he performs great signs, so that he even makes fire come down out of heaven to the earth in the presence of men. So he gives the appearance of being a god. And he deceives those who dwell on the earth because of the signs which it was given to perform in the presence of the beast, telling those who dwell on the earth to make an image of the beast who had the wound of the sword and has come to life. And there was given to him to give breath to the image of the beast, that the image of the beast might even speak, and cause many as do not worship the image of the beast to be killed. And he causes all, the small and the great, the rich and the poor, and the free men, the slaves, to be given a mark on their right hand or on their forehead. So God seals his, Satan seals his, and he provides that no one should be able to buy or to sell except the one who has the mark either the name of the beast or the number of his name. We're not going to get into, we'll try and pick that up next week, where some people who are saying that the mark of the beast is this or is that. Verse 18 is what we're getting at. Here is wisdom. Let him who has understanding calculate the number of the beast, for the number is that of man, and his number is 666. It's interesting that the beast has been successful even to today, where people, will just cower in fear of the number 666 and the mark of the beast and what that might be, right? It may be implanting chips into your hand and that sort of thing. And it's the devil, it's the red devil with the pitchfork and the horns. And more importantly, just as we just read, he would want you to believe he's a god and he's powerful and he can just wipe us all out, just snap us out of existence. All those who would dare follow the commands of God. He's like a god, but the truth of the matter is what John says here at the end is he says, the number of the beast is that of a man. And we have this, again, so many people who will hold up 666 as this big, powerful thing. It's the number of a man. And, as Glenn had pointed out, if 7 is completeness, if 7 is perfection, then 6 is failure. And it's interesting when you consider the 3-time loser. The number of the beast, 666, again, if we attribute that to Domitian, to the beast that's worked through these kings, he's not just 6. He's not just failure. He's not 666, which is double failure. The number is 666, failure, failure. Doomed to fail forever and always. Weak, useless, not a god, not powerful, right? Not complete, not perfect. Just short, short, short. We'll go ahead and end there unless there's any thoughts, any questions. Yeah.
We left out one thing, and that's our social security number.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, it's always been interesting to me how much that number, the power that people are willing to give that number. When very clearly in verse 18 it says it's the number of a man. And who am I and who are you as men? Not 7, not complete, not perfect. And so to give all that power to 666, which is a 3-time failure, just doomed to fail forever, it means nothing. It's the number of a man. If you get a license plate with 666, you're fine. Okay, your social security number. If you go shopping and the change they give you back is $6.66, you don't have to give them back a penny or something. It's the number of a man. It's Satan's failure and his doom for failure. That's all I got.